Welcome back to New Day. The White House says President Obama will host Ukraine's interim government Wednesday. This as thousands turn out across Ukraine to protest both for and against Russian intervention in Crimea. What does this all mean? How did we get here? What will happen next? Tough questions, but we have someone who has as good a shot at knowing as anybody else, Senator John McCAIN. It's very good to have you, Senator. Thanks for being on the show. So let's deal with how we got here. Question of perspective. Whom do you think mismanaged the relationship with Vladimir Putin worse, President Bush or President Obama?
I think that both, but Georgia pales in comparison to Ukraine when you just look at the map. But also, I think it's important to recognize that he was encouraged by Georgia, so you have to put some blame on the Bush administration. But having said that, there's no doubt that he now has three: Moldova, he occupies part of that country, Georgia, and now Ukraine. This has very serious implications for future activities of Mr. Putin, because what this administration, and to a degree the last administration, doesn't understand, Vladimir Putin is an old apparatchik KGB colonel that believes in the Russian Empire. This is the guy that said the greatest catastrophe of the 20th century was the breakup of the Soviet Union. So whether we're in the 21st century or the 18th century or whatever it is, Vladimir Putin is what he is and has to be treated accordingly.
Now,
and by the way, that does not mean reignition of the Cold War. But yeah.
Understood.
Yeah.
And although needs saying, because there's so much on the table now in terms of options. In fairness, you have always been aggressively against Vladimir Putin, and at least in terms of underestimating what he really wants. Why do you think you've now had two presidents take such a different perspective on this man and seem to come out on the short end of the stick?
I think hope over realism. When you look into somebody's eyes and see their soul, or something like that, the reset, which clearly wasn't working in a whole broad variety of ways. I think that, again, it's hope over reality. And all of us want to get along with the Russians, but the fact is that Vladimir Putin presides over a decaying empire. I mean, but yet at the same time, he's going to do what's necessary, what he thinks is necessary to preserve that, quote, near abroad, of which Ukraine is the crown jewel. You look at Ukraine on the map. It's been said many times, probably on the show. Russia with Ukraine is an empire, and without it, it's a country. And Vladimir Putin understands that, and we have to treat him accordingly.
And it's interesting because going into this situation, there was so much speculation that it was accidental. We didn't see it coming. You have seen it all along and saying this is what he's always wanted. He needs it. Now, one thing that
Could
also...
I just say,
please,
I noticed on the Sunday show, many of the people say, well, this just sort of happened.
Right.
You know, our old Secretary of Defense who once said, stuff happens.
Right.
It doesn't just happen. And that's what Ronald Reagan was all about.
Understanding what could happen and protecting against it before it happens.
And treating people from a realistic, Vladimir Putin, from the realistic point of view of what he's all about. And that has to do with making sure that he knows there are consequences to actions. And that has been totally ignored. Even on Friday, while the troops were moving in, Lavrov told our Secretary of State, don't worry, nothing's going on. I mean, that is really embarrassing.
Seems patently false.
Patently false. They just totally lie to their face.
So the question becomes, what do you do? And this is going to take on a political aspect, and it's going to take on the practical aspect of what you do actually do, because there's the perception of it. You know, in doing the research, in 2008, Bush was criticized about Georgia, and you could argue it was a worse incursion in terms of there was violence on the ground.
And by the way, I criticized too and wanted to do more.
You
so
did.
These people would say, well, we didn't want to do anything in 2008. I wanted to do a lot, including giving them defensive weapons.
You did, but I felt that the dynamic was different there. There was more unity in terms of, look, we don't like what's happening here, but let's get around the president. You even said at the time, listen, now's not the time for this. Let's get around and figure out what to do, even though we're making mistakes. Yeah. I feel this time, there's more bitter politics here at home than there was in 2008, that Republicans especially are taking the opportunity to attack the president, even when we seem to have a larger set of concerns with Putin and Ukraine. Fair criticism?
Well, except that, again, this reset and all of that led up to this continued belief that somehow you could deal with this guy in a way that is not keeping with who he is. But having said that, we're working in the Senator Menendez, Senator Corker, and Senator Murphy and I are working on a legislative package that will be going through the committee on Tuesday. We'll be working on that as well. But the thing that infuriates me is that to think that this guy can still be dealt with in the way we've been dealing with him in the past is something that it doesn't seem that we've learned that lesson.
So what do we do? Do you think we get him out of Crimea, or is it as Gates, former secretary, said, Gates is gone? Crimea is gone. You can't get it back.
I'd hate to admit it, but I'm afraid that that's the case. Now that I predicted Crimea because I predicted Putin would never give up Sevastopol. Now I don't know whether he's going to take eastern Ukraine with a de facto kind of partition, the eastern part of Ukraine or not. I think it depends on what he thinks the consequences are.
What would the consequence be that would stop him? If you could do anything, what would you do?
I think, first of all, sanctions on not only the military side, but his oligarch friends. Don't let them travel to London. Take care of their bank accounts.
Use the Magnitsky Act.
Go forward with restore the missile defense in Czech Republic and Poland. Move forward, have some military operations with the next pressured countries, which are the Baltics. That's the next countries, and he continues to put pressure on them. Accelerate Georgia and Moldova into NATO. We have a wide range of options which are not, quote, military action, and take them quick.
Are they all on the table?
I think all of those options are on the table.
Are you hearing it from the White House that they're thinking of these things?
I think they are moving forward with some of the sanctions. We're working with the administration on this package that we hope we can get through the Congress this week, because we go out of session next week. I hope we can. But
no boots on the ground, though.
I don't see. I'd love to say there's some way we could react military, but there's not. There's not a way. And the American people, by the way, wouldn't support it.
Well, certainly 59% of the American people in our new ORC CNN poll say we like sanctions. That's the right way to go, which is obviously a reflection of battle fatigue, and rightly so. Nobody knows that better than you. So if you see it as going forward now, the issues on the ground are going to stay the same. If they vote in Crimea that they want to go with Russia, and it is a valid public vote, isn't that us?
I can promise you they will vote.
But don't you have to honor it as democracy?
There won't be observers there. This is the old Hitler-Stalin routine.
It's a vote, but it's in quotes.
Oh, my God. Yeah, I mean, it cannot be valid. So, I promise you, Vladimir Putin will not be thrown out of Crimea because of a vote.
One other thing. Let's just turn to domestic here for a second. You go to the CPAC, give a strong speech, well received. You also deal with Ted Cruz a little bit.
But I was not at CPAC.
I know, but you know, you were well received there in terms of what you meant in your message. And then Ted Cruz comes up and says what he had to say, which is talking about you a little bit as running for president, Romney as running for president, and Bob Dole. You take exception to talking about Bob Dole. He says, Ted Cruz, well, I didn't mean it that way. But to you, it rubs you the wrong way. You believe Ted Cruz overstepped.
I mean, his words were that we failed to stand on principle. Bob Dole's an older man now. He has fought for his country. He was Ronald Reagan's top lieutenant during the Reagan years. As I said, if Mr. Cruz and others want to beat up on me and Romney, that's fine. But can't we honor Bob Dole without dragging him into this Tea Party versus non-Tea Party? It's just totally inappropriate, and I don't think that Bob Dole deserves it. He deserves our honor and our respect now.
A little bit of a look at the new generation of politicians seem to put more of a premium on being ugly than on being respectful. Fair criticism?
I think it's a fair criticism if you say things like that about someone like Bob Dole to try to make a point at a conservative gathering. It's just, he doesn't need to do it, and Bob Dole was so wonderful to me. I can't tell you how I idolize him, and so I and others take exception to using him as some kind of applause line.
Understood, and the respect is certainly due Bob Dole and you. Senator, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Brooke?
Senator McCain.